Welcome to week 5 of interpersonal processes. I'm going to go through a quick PowerPoint slides that entail what to expect for this week, a little bit of content from this week, and then also what to look for next week coming up. You're getting close to the end of the semester here. It's a 7-week semester, so we only have 3 more weeks left, including this one. And so I want to make sure you guys felt comfortable to go through. I've gotten a few questions about the small group projects, and so we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So what to expect for this week? You have a lot on your plate this week. So you have to read 2 readings. One is by Lagar and one is by Murphy et al. Both of them are phenomenal reads, but Lagar is what I'm covering a little bit today, and I definitely would recommend it as far as pieces of content that can inform your presentations and that can speak to specific tools you can use in the field. So I really like the Lagar reading. It covers some of the things we've actually already covered, most notably nonviolent communication. But it also it really pushes forward that person for first dynamic, which I feel very passionately about. So I really do I want to recommend the Lagar rating with as much as humanly possible. There's a role play video that's done by one of our faculty colleagues here. It's on the Common Grounds process. Um, it's important to watch that because we're going to ask you to practice it the same way we asked you to practice the talking papers last week. Common Grounds is a phenomenal and highly utilized practice in our field, specifically with conflict and couples therapy, but also if you're talking about greater scale things like um, differences in workplace environment, differences between political parties, common ground as a strategy is something that's really helpful to try and bridge a gap when there's a lot of difference in perspective and opinion. And so it's really just the tool to get heard. So if you feel, or if any party feels like they're not getting heard, that's a good place to start, considering that, as adults, we come to learn, hopefully, that there's going to be differences and you can learn to respect differences. I think where it becomes this like really charged argument is when you have people not only having differences but also not even hearing or feeling like um, your difference is being understood. So if you're arguing with somebody and it just feels like you're screaming at a wall, they're screaming at a wall, and nobody's feeling heard. Now, if you felt like somebody understood your perspective and just disagreed, you'd probably be able to walk away from that. But considering that a lot of times arguments become very personal, it's important to exercise some kind of strategy to help everyone in the room be understood, or um, at least to be heard in a way that it can be recited back, which is the whole process of common grounds. So it's an extremely important strategy to learn. I definitely would watch the role play and test it out with anybody who has two opposing opinions to things. I've had people do it for pro-choice. Like really, you can do it for any really heavy-hitting issue. If you disagree with your significant other or two of your siblings disagree with each other, common grounds is really a good exercise to play out. There's also this activity or assignment in which we're going to have you watch these videos made by Genevieve Clay. Um, they're very short. I think they're all like 3 to 5 minutes long. They're not certainly time intensive at all, but it talks a lot about stereotyping and assuming, uh, you know, assuming maybe a little too quickly what somebody's capable of. Trying to think if that makes sense. I don't want to give too much about the videos, but that's what the topic of your discussion post for this week is. So it's definitely important to watch those as well. But like I said, there's 3 of them, and they're all very, very short. But you do also have a process note due this Sunday. This process note should cover all of these things. Your experiences in your DIA that happened last week, what's happening in your small group this week and last week, also the process of um, reading the content and going through the discussion board posts and responses. At this point of the semester, it's really important to hear how small groups are progressing, if there's any conflict, if there's any animosity, if you're feeling unsure or anxious. This is the place to play that out. So you're going to want to be really honest and raw about how you're dealing with some of the differences and challenges in working with other people, especially other people you don't know tremendously well. So that is the process note. So again, things that are due this week. You're going to test out the Common Grounds practice strategy with somebody, and post about it on a discussion board. You're going to watch Genevieve Clay's short videos and post on a discussion board. You are going to do a process note, and you're going to meet with your small group. All right, in your small group meeting, you're going to meet together and you're going to make a short video. This video can literally be 30 seconds long. It's just to show that you have the format planned out, maybe not the format, but the platform where you're going to do your actual group presentation. I know probably all, if not most of you are going to use Zoom, and I think that's the one that I've seen be the most beneficial because you can have everybody on the same screen in like a little tile format and then also have a PowerPoint if you need it, or for when you need it rather. And Zoom also does this cool thing where I'm sure you guys have noticed in your small group discussions, it highlights the person who's talking. And so when you're talking about having a role play, like you're not going to want to switch from camera to camera to show the person whose line it is. But Zoom kind of does that for you, so that's pretty cool. I do want to go through a little bit about the small group project because you're probably getting to the place where you're finalizing your scenario, thinking about your strategies. We're going to cover a couple things today that can be considered strategies too. So if you haven't thought of them yet, you're completely fine. But if you are getting to that point, I'm going to review a little bit of what I've said in the past. You're going to do a role play. Every person in your team should play a role in a single role play. So most of you folks have 3 people in your team, some have 4, I think. Oh no, there's 15, so there should just be 5 groups of 3. And in which case you might have one person play the social worker and then a couple doing therapy. You might have a family, you might have reunification process with a bio parent and a child and a social worker, but make sure that everybody's involved, that everybody has lines to participate. You're going to want to make sure that you, in some fashion, display the oppression of that dialogue. So a lot of folks end up, a lot of folks end up discussing a person's marginalized status, whether there be LGBTQ or of a different ethnicity or a different religion that is going to be playing a role in the conversation they're having, even if they're not talking specifically about it. If you have somebody who's wearing traditional Muslim attire, and somebody says something that's considered a microaggression to that population, that's something that we want to talk about, put a lens to, make sure that we are making ourselves aware of it, and also putting ourselves in the role of how to overcome situations like that and make sure we're supporting the people of difference or how we could react as people of difference. So if you are portraying somebody who's gay and you aren't gay, it might be a good opportunity to think about how, as an ally, could I participate in this conversation if something were to come up. I'm trying to think of examples, but so my partner and I, for instance, we were at a New Year's Eve party at one point, and we took the trash out from my sister's house. We're taking her trash out. That's whatever. And we get back, and an older gentleman asked if we were making out, and I was like, no, we were taking the trash out. And then he said, well, if you do go to make out, make sure to invite me. Now, as the person that's directed to, my response was nothing, but Also, the older gentleman is my sister's father-in-law, so it's not somebody that I really feel comfortable saying something to directly. However, another bystander at the party could have easily intervened and said something about, hey, listen, this isn't, that's not the appropriate thing to say. And also, you've now made that person self-conscious forever because I see him all the time, and it's clearly resonated enough in my head that I can regurgitate it right now. So, things like that happen all the time. I'm particularly lucky and I have a ton of privileges, the color of my skin, the fact that I don't have to disclose my difference to anybody unless I make an effort to, and also the fact that I'm able-bodied. I am able to participate in educational activities in a typical fashion. I come from a middle-class family at this point, so everyone's walking to the room with positions of power and positions of difference. And so it's important to talk about it, to put it into your scenario, and talk about, or at least play out, what would happen around that topic. I think everything we do should be informed. We should always be thinking about the ways marginalized populations and uh, people of all sorts can be impacted by the power dynamic in the room at play. Okay. That's a soapbox I'm going to get down from now. But moving forward in your small group presentation, you also are going to play out a strategy. So you should have two strategies that you play out. Oftentimes you play out the two strategies at the same time. So you might do active listening while you're doing nonviolent communication, or you might use nonviolent communication as a way to frame the things you say in a common ground process, right? You can put these two things together. We'll talk about a few things that we cover on Lagar in like 5 minutes, and think about how those things come together as well. Once you finish that role play, you're going to go to a PowerPoint presentation. That PowerPoint presentation has to entail um, what your strategies were, why you chose it for this particular scenario, has to determine what your display of oppression looked like, and what impact that had on the role play you guys chose. And then also at the end, I want you all to have a conversation about how you progressed as a team. And so you might have felt that there's a lot of tension in the group. This is a time to talk about it. I always tell my students when I was in interpersonal processes, I actually ended the group in conflict. And I was in the seated program, so we had to do this in front of our class live, the role play and the presentation afterwards. And so I said in the discussion, look, I still feel like we're in conflict. Um, we're certainly not in pseudo community because people are sniping at each other. But there was definitely never really a clear dynamic of power. There was certainly some passive aggressive statements made. There was a lot of vying for control, and there wasn't a lot of freedom or flexibility to really feel like I had that comfort level to dissent or to be confrontational. And so that all made me feel in the end like we were in conflict. And actually, my other group members all agreed and said, yeah, I do think we're in conflict. We're not fighting, we're not yelling at each other or cursing anyone out, but we're nobody feels comfortable to um, go against anyone else. And when we do, it's met with a lot of resistance. And so there was just a lot of animosity in that room. However, in the process of talking it out for our presentation, I think we all ended up feeling like we were teetering onto the emptying stage. And had we before like sat down and talked out what was going on, we might have gotten farther along in the process. But by the end of, I mean, we're all civil, and you're going to see these folks that you're working with for the rest of your program, just like I saw those three people for the rest of my program. And we still see each other actually, um, now and again. And so, there's long lasting effects from this. But there was certainly no feelings of ill will towards each other. We just didn't get there, and that's okay. I do think having that raw conversation is important, and being able to really have that conversational style uh,